This is Mrs. Nelson, and this is Chapter 7, The Goblin Universe. In the kitchen, Bertha verified that the tags were tracking devices and insisted that if the gizmo said Grace was in the library, she was in the library, unless she had taken her tag off and left it there. Marty slipped his souffle into the oven, then wandered down to the library again. The gizmo said Grace was there, but there was still no sign of her. Why did she take her tag off? Boo! Something hit Marty in the back. He screamed, collapsed on the floor, and covered his head, expecting a fly banshee to tear him to shreds, until he heard someone laughing. He looked up. "That's not funny," he shouted. "Not funny at all." When he stood, the Frankenstein monkey, which Grace had hurled from the balcony, fell to the floor. "I wish you had seen your face," Grace managed to gasp. "You'll pay for this." He sprinted up the spiral staircase. Grace was small but quick. He couldn't get within 20 feet of her. Okay, he said breathlessly, after 4 laps around the balcony. "Truce, I have something really cool to show you." Grace wasn't sure if she should trust him or not. "Do you promise not to grab me or do any other horrible thing?" "Yeah, I promise." Monkey lay below, so he could not steal the deal. But Grace allowed Marty to approach her anyway, keeping a sharp eye out on any sign of treachery. You're in a pretty good mood," Marty observed, pleased to see the change in her. She almost seemed like the old Grace. He showed her the little computer. "It's called a gizmo." "What is it?" "Watch." He clicked her name, and blue and gray squares appeared next to each other on the screen. "That's us. The tags Bertha gave us are tracking devices." He gave her a suspicious look. "Were you up here the first time I came through?" Grace grinned. "Why didn't you say something, nose picker?" Grace answered. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said innocently, and continued his gizmo demonstration. "I turned this video thing on and saw Phil and the guy they rescued from the kayak getting into the Humvee. The guy is a woman." "No way." "Her name is Dr. Laurel Lee." Grace recounted most of the conversation she had overheard, admitting the reason she was in such a good mood. By the time she finished, Marty had all but forgotten about Gizmo. He started browsing the cryptid sections. Grace followed along. "So wolves believe in Bigfoot?" "Wolf believes in Bigfoot?" "I think so," she answered. He continued next to the shelves. "And mermaids?" "Maybe." He reached to the little humanoid section. "Elves, fairies, and leprechauns?" "He might." "And this crypto, whatever you call it?" "Cryptozoology," Grace said, "the study of hidden animals." "How do you study something that's hidden?" "By finding the hidden places, I suppose. I was just reading that some people call the places where cryptids live the Goblin Universe." Marty laughed. "Sounds like Halloween." "Wolf is dead serious about it, and I told you there was something the matter with him. You should have seen the look in his eyes when he saw that egg. It was scary, like he was possessed or something." "So what's this monkey bimby thing?" "It's pronounced Moki Bimby," Grace answered. "It's a dinosaur." "You're joking." Grace opened the hidden ones and read the description. Moki Bimby is a small, sword-topped dinosaur, slightly larger than an elephant. Its overall length has been recorded to be between 16 and 32 feet. The length of the neck is 5 to 10 feet. The length of the tail is 5 to 10 feet as well. Its footprints are rounded in shape and 1 to 3 feet in diameter with 3 claws. The distance between tracks is about 7 to 8 feet. The last specimens are thought to have lived near Lake Tili in the Republic of Congo in Central Africa. Wow, a real dinosaur. He looked at the drawing in the book, which wasn't very good in his opinion. Let me get this straight, he said. Wolf is going to the Congo to save a friend of his from Noah Blackfoot, who isn't who he appears to be? Grace nodded. And Mom and Dad are going to investigate Noah Blackwood before they disappear? Apparently, Grace said. Marty leaned over the balcony, and in that box there, down there, is a real dinosaur egg? Alleged dinosaur egg. What's Wolf going to do about us? Marty asked. Grace had been waiting for this question, but wasn't prepared to answer it. She thought it was best if their uncle told him that he was sending them back to boarding school. I guess we'll have to ask him. Marty flipped open the gizmo and clicked his uncle's name. The third-story floor plan appeared. Unlike the first and second floors, there had several rooms. There were only 2 rooms in the 3rd floor. A smaller room labeled bedroom number 1. The remaining room was called Wolf Den, and that's where the turquoise square appeared. Let's go talk to him, Marty said. Wouldn't it be great to go to the Congo? No, Grace thought. It would be horrible, and she had no idea that, given enough time, Marty could talk Wolf into taking them with him. At one time, he had talked Dr. Beasel into taking their entire class to Spain for 2 weeks in the middle of the school year, despite the headmaster's intense dislike and distrust of Marty. The trip went well until Marty was arrested for setting free the bulls from the Madrid bullfighting ring. She needed something to distract her adventurous brother and saw her chance on the gizmo's small screen. That's the kayaker, she said, pointing to Laurel's name. Oh, yeah? Marty clicked the button, and the yellow square appeared in the living room. And where are these other people? Grace asked. Marty happily started clicking through the names. Phil Sr. and Phil Jr. were in the houses in the staff compound, along with half a dozen other people. It looked as if each staff member had a separate residence within the compound because they were labeled house number 1, house number 2, all the way up to 12. Bertha was still in the kitchen, and I was just in there helping her make dinner, Marty explained. She had a lot to learn about cooking, but I think I'll bring her along. I whipped up a simple souffle, and she was pretty interested in the process. He looked at his watch. In fact, I have to take it out of the oven in a few minutes. He continued clicking names. Someone named Bo was in the north side of the island. Vid was on the south side of the island near the place called Lost Lake. Who do you suppose Bo and Vid are? Marty asked. More importantly, Grace said, what do you think Bo and Vid are doing out in the middle of the woods at this time of night? And why are they and the others out here on the island in the middle of nowhere? They obviously work for Wolf. Doing what? Who knows? Marty turned the gizmo off. Let's take a look at the dinosaur egg. Before Grace could stop him, Marty was halfway down the spiral staircase. She caught up with him just as he opened the cardboard box. I don't think you should touch it. There's no harm in looking. He took it out of the box and held it under the light. Wow, a genuine dinosaur egg. It looked more like a semi-deflated soccer ball to Grace. Wouldn't it be great to see a dinosaur? Marty asked. There are no more dinosaurs, Grace said, and there's no such place as Goblin Universe. She knew where Marty was heading, at least in his imagination, which had no boundaries. She had to stop him before he passed the point of no return. The last dinosaur died 65 million years ago. If there were any dinosaurs left, we would know about them. Every inch of this earth has been mapped. Not by satellite, not necessarily explored, Marty said, proud he had actually remembered something from his geography class. If Moki Mbembe doesn't exist, why is it described in that book? And why would a pygmy lie about it? That's an excellent question, Dr. Lee asked from behind them. The twins jumped and Marty nearly dropped the egg. You must be Grace and Marty, she continued. My name's Laurel. She looked up at the balcony, then smiled at them. But you already knew that. The conversation you overheard must have been very enlightening. Grace flushed with embarrassment. You knew I was up there? Laurel laughed. Not you specifically, but now I know it was you. I sent someone up there. Petey nearly gave you away. Why didn't you give me away? It wasn't my place. I'm sure you had a reason for staying hidden. Did my uncle know? If he did, he didn't mention it. Laurel looked at Marty. Perhaps you should put that egg away. Marty handed it to her, and she placed it back into the box. Now, let's get back to Marty's question about the pygmy telling lies. I've never known a pygmy to tell an outright lie. Well, they are certainly capable of exaggeration, Grace said. She liked Laurel, but she was a little annoyed at the intrusion. She wanted Marty to herself so she could convince him how crazy all this was. Mokili Mbembe probably started out as an animal in some story concocted by a pygmy to impress his friends. The story has passed from one pygmy to the next, and over the years they started to believe that the animal was real. This is how most legends begin. I wrote a paper on the origins of legends at school. That's an interesting theory, Laurel said, but you're forgetting a very important point. How would this first pygmy know that what a sauropod looks like? They don't have televisions, movies, or books. They have no idea that the earth was once dominated by dinosaurs, and yet they give you a perfect description of a sauropod. It was a good point, but Grace was not about to give up. Maybe some explorer came through the area years before and told the pygmies he was looking for dinosaurs. Perhaps he drew them a picture of a sauropod, and that's where the idea came from. That's possible, but it's not likely, Laurel said. Lake Teely hasn't really been explored, not by the scientific community anyway. It's not the way to anywhere. It's not on the way to anywhere, and there's no major rivers near it. What do rivers have to do with it? Grace asked. Everything. They're the superhighways of tropical exploration. The only way in or out in some of these remote areas. Explorers have been using them for centuries, but the problem with rivers is that you only see what's on the fringe of the environment. It's like driving on interstate freeway. You really don't see much. The Earth's last memories will be found in the deepest interiors, in places where no one goes except for a few tough indigenous people. And believe it or not, there are still a lot of these places left. If you saw the Lake Teely region, you'd understand how a dinosaur could hide out for several million years. We'd love to go, Marty exclaimed. Laura laughed. That was not an invitation, Marty, and it's not up to me, I'm afraid. What about that souffle, Marty? Grace asked. She had to put a stop to this. Huh? The souffle? She repeated. Didn't you say? You're right. He looked at Laurel. Are you having dinner with us? Yes. Great. We can talk about our trip then. He ran out of the library. Laura watched him leave, then turned to Grace and said, Your brother's very self-assured. Grace nodded. He's also very impressionable. You mean open-minded? I mean easily taken in. I see, Laurel raised her eyebrow. But not you. Just because I don't believe in living dinosaurs or the goblin universe doesn't mean I am not open-minded. I suppose you're right, Laurel said with a gentle smile. Tell me about yourself. Grace gave her a brief outline of her and Marty's history. So you hadn't met your uncle until this morning? Laurel asked, surprised. We didn't even know we had an uncle until a few days ago. That is rather odd, Laurel said. What do you think of him? I'm not sure, Grace hedged. We haven't really had much of a chance to talk. How old are you? 13. Really? Grace saw a glimmer of disbelief across Laurel's face. I'm small for my age. So was I, Laurel said. In fact, I'm still pretty small. Grace smiled. She liked Laurel even better close up than she did from the balcony. What were you doing when you came into the library? You mean this? She held her arms out and closed her eyes. Yes, I was walking an imaginary high wire. Why? Laura put her arms down and opened her eyes. Because I was afraid. You didn't look frightened when you came into the library. Looks can be very deceiving, Laurel said. My unorthodox arrival caused your uncle a good deal of trouble, and I knew he would be upset. I was nervous. Before I spoke to him, I had to deal with my fear. And you do that by pretending you're walking on a high wire? Laurel nodded. Before I became an anthropologist, I was an aerialist in a circus. It's been a long time since I have been up on a real wire, but I still practice in my imagination. It helps me focus and control my fears. Grace would have given just about anything to learn how to control her fears. It must have worked, she said. You didn't seem intimidated by Wolf in the least. Your uncle is a formidable man. But when I'm on the wire, I'm taller than everyone. I could never do that, Grace said. Walk on a high wire? Of course you could. The only way to overcome your fears is to get over them a little at a time. Grace shook her head. I'm afraid of heights. You don't start out very high, Laurel said. When I was your age, I was afraid of heights too. My father was a circus clown. The ringmaster made it clear that my father wanted to stand the circus with this little girl going to have to get up on that thin wire and thrill the audience. They made you? They sure did. What about your mother? What did she passed away when I was very young. Laurel said, it was just me and my dad. I still don't think I could get up on a high wire, Grace said. If you had to, you could. Petey ran into the room barking and jumped into Laurel's arms. She cuddled the poodle for a moment, then looked at Grace. Do you know why Petey barks? Because she's aggressive, Grace answered. Laurel shook her head. She barks because she's afraid, and she's afraid because she's little. If she were the size of a normal dog, I don't think she would bark nearly as much. Grace was certain that her fears were caused by more than her size, but there was some truth in what Laurel was saying. My biggest problem is learning the high wire, Laurel continued, was my tendency to faint whenever I got scared. That happens to me too, Grace said. Like a light switch off? Yes, Grace said. Everything goes completely black. How did you get over it? By practicing. Eventually, I learned to use my fear instead of letting it use me. When I focused on the thin wire, time seemed to slow down, and I saw the world more crisply. Balancing my body seemed to balance my heart. I found that it worked on other fears as well. They're still with me, but I've learned how to control them. How did your mother die? Grace said. She fell from... Marty walked into the library wearing an apron that was way too big for him. Dinner is served, he said.